Education in prison. It's not a new concept, but now there's a first of its kind in the nation prison education program that's happening right here in Central Illinois. Dr. Sheila Quirk-Bailey is the president of Illinois Central College, and Dr. Elizabeth Godinez is the program's instructor. Thanks for coming in, ladies. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Please give us a brief explanation of what is new with this program, and then we'll kind of dive into how we got here.
So about 18 months ago, a federal law was passed that reinstated allowing incarcerated individuals to access the Pell program so they could begin to take their degrees, earn certificates while they're incarcerated. And so it wasn't, 2 weeks after the announcement that I get a call from the warden at Pekin, and they said, hey, let's do this, right? So it's been an interesting journey because they didn't have the metrics they didn't have the program set up as we kept pushing them to say we wanted to move forward at ICC. And none of this happens without the partnership with the prison. So that's how this all was launched.
And just so people know, Pell Grants are used for, they're grants that you don't have to pay back, right?
Correct.
And I know that they used to pay for college for incarcerated individuals, but then in 1994 it was banned. Right. Then it's slowly come back since then. So you get this call from Pekin. They say, hey, let's do this.
Right.
Where do you go from there?
Well, that was an interesting journey because where does that program begin? Once we got down to Dr. G, as her students call her, which I just love, once we got down to the point of who would teach it and how we start to work out, right, you can't have access to the internet, they don't have access to computers. So once we tried to figure all that was the easy part, trying to figure out how that would work. On the back of the house was a little more difficult. So admissions, registrar, student services, learning services, the library, everybody, it was like an all college project trying to figure out how we create this microcosm of a college in the prison because they don't have access to we're literally passing notes, right? They're writing what they need on paper that then Dr. G brings back and we have the right department then figure it out and get it back to her. That's how that works.
So were you approached to take on this interesting assignment?
Well, when the opportunity came, I have been an adjunct instructor in our business legal information systems department at the college for about 9 to 10 years, and becoming a full-time faculty member has always been, an aspiration, a goal of mine. And so when this opportunity presented itself, I absolutely had to jump on it. So the college had provided this opportunity to be the prison education program, and I couldn't think of anything better to fill my cup.
No apprehension?
Not at all. Nope. I will be honest with you, the biggest fear that I had when starting this program, it was failing the students, not the, walking into a federal prison. I never had a fear of that, ever. So it was just, I hope I'm the right person that can make a difference. So.
Can you describe the classroom experience for us? Paint a picture of what it's like. It's obviously not your typical college setting.
No, it's a little different, specifically when I have to enter the men's federal prison. So, you have to go through all of your security checks. Usually I'm wanded. I have to sign in. I have to be stamped. I have a badge that I have to wear. I'm escorted as I walk through the open area, like the compound, the big yard area. So I'm always escorted where I go. And that's a little different from, just hopping out of your car and running into your classroom on the main East Peoria campus. So it takes a little bit more time. But once I arrived to the education department, which is, a building inside the compound in the men's facility, it's just your typical classroom, it's your typical environment. They have a law library, like a study area for students, and they have an actual library there for students to use. And then there's several other classrooms because the prison also has other classes, going on. But I have about 20 men in my classroom right now. And I've never felt more protected in a federal prison than with my male students. So they take very good care of me.
That's great. So when exactly did you start this?
I started June 3rd.
Okay.
our first class was offered in the summer semester, and we started with Business 100, which was our Professionalism for Employees class. And we started with 23 men and 15 women, and it's just been a success since. We moved in after we completed that class, and all students were incredibly successful. They're so engaged, you know, because they want to be there. It's just an incredible experience. And so after we completed the Business 100 class, we moved in, and we are right now working on Principles of Management, so our Management 113 class, and we're just exploring different types of management styles and approaches, and everything's going great.
Now, for the men and women to get into these classes, do they already have to have a GED or a high school diploma?
So the prison does require that when a person comes to the facility, that if they do not already have a GED, they are put through a GED program there. So yes, all of my students, men and women, do have a GED, and a lot of them actually have several college credits as well too. So we have a lot of students, excuse me, in the men and women's classrooms that are previous college attendees. So. Yeah.
Sheila, you mentioned earlier that they don't have internet access, so there's a few challenges when it comes to trying to get Pell Grants and other things like that. And it seems like the prison, from what I've heard, they're all in on this, and they want this for their folks there.
Absolutely. So if you take a step back, this program hasn't existed in 30 years in this country, and why wouldn't you want someone to create a skill set that puts them in a different position, right, post-incarceration, so they can be supported and make better decisions and be in a different place than they were before. These types of programs have a dramatic impact on reducing recidivism. And so not only do our wonderful faculty like Dr. G work with the content, but we support them with their success in life beyond our degree, just like we would any other student. So we're really preparing them for life success, right, when they take that next step. So from a prison standpoint, I mean, they're still running a prison. So they had standardized schedules, and they had, right, things, this is the way it works here. Well, now that we're pulling 33 out on a different schedule to do this, they have been amazingly flexible in a very rigid system to make this available for students. So we couldn't ask for better partners in trying to make this happen.
Yeah.
Speaking of recidivism, a 2018 meta-study published in the Journal of Experimental Criminology found that people who are enrolled in post-secondary education programs are 48% less likely to be reincarcerated than their peers who don't. And as far as unemployment post-release, that increases by 12% for individuals who participate in any kind of correctional education. So it seems like helping these people out benefits everybody.
It absolutely benefits everybody. So some would make the argue, why would you invest your funds that way? Well, you just gave us two of the reasons. The other issue would be, once they are released, they would qualify for those funds. So why wouldn't you just back that up a little bit? So on the way out, right, they're not in a situation where they're unemployed and don't have skills, right? They've earned those skills on funds they would have qualified for anyway later, right? And they can actually hit the ground running in terms of moving forward with their lives. It just makes sense for everyone, and they are so grateful. We went out and met with them. We had the Assistant Secretary of Education in when we made our announcement last week, and they will say, I've made some bad decisions. I understand this is where I am. Right, reset. Right, anything I can do to make things better in my life and take responsibility and contribute. They're all in, and it's just a wonderful thing to see.
Absolutely.
Dr. G, do you ever, in your classes, do you ever talk with the students about why they're there, what they've done? Does that ever come up at all?
No, I really try try not to. They have shared their stories. I mean, so I guess yes, some of them have come forward with their stories. I never ask. I feel like it's a very private thing, and if they would like to share with me, and I try to be respectful that there are other people in the classroom too. So it might not be a story that they want to share with everybody. So I don't necessarily ask, but some do share that with me, and then I also too will share my story. You know, a lot of the times, like we were kind of speaking, I am a GED recipient myself. I went through Illinois Central's college program. And so I think that me having a GED and them having a GED, it kind of, you know, we kind of have bonded over having a lot of the same life experiences. We were, you know, I was a young mother as well. And so some of them are young mothers in my women's classes. And so we have bonded over a lot of different life experiences. And so it's been great.
Do they ever share their goals with you?
Oh, all the time, yeah.
What are some of those goals?
So I have a lot of the women would like to be entrepreneurs. I have several students. I have one who would like to be, she's currently and has prior to coming to the women's camp, she was a photographer. So she plans to take all of her business knowledge and her new skill sets that she's learned in the program and apply them to her photography business when she gets out. I have several students who are looking to be business entrepreneurs and maybe opening up their own businesses when they complete. And then I have some that are really, you know, looking to be an advocate and a support for maybe other women who are incarcerated too. So I have, a lot of business women, entrepreneurs. Yeah, so.
And as far as while they're incarcerated, is the end goal to try and get an associate's degree or work their way towards getting an associate's degree and then maybe finish when they get out?
Well, I think the goal is to get them a certificate.
Yep.
So they would take the business classes. So they would probably need to take those gen eds to complete the full degree in time period too. But when you take those, that business certificate, you have all of the technical skills you need then to be employable and to be successful. And then there'd be a next step they would need to take to actually earn the full 2-year degree.
So they may not even want or need the degree necessarily. They want the skills to try and get a job when they get out.
In today's job market, right, that degree doesn't take you much farther than that certificate does. There was a point in our nation's history where it didn't. It absolutely does now. And we're offering these courses in 8-week chunks as opposed to 16, so we're trying to reduce that cycle time to make sure that they can complete and move through the program so they actually have that piece of paper when they exit.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in this world too of technology and online classes and all that stuff, we've said before they don't have internet access, so it's really kind of old-fashioned book and teacher learning. Yeah, it is. We're paper pencil for the most part.
However, the women and the men did a fabulous job just in the summer. I had given them the materials and they created their own PowerPoints for their presentations at the end of the class period, and they are phenomenal. I have a lot of artists on the men and the women's side, and some of their PowerPoints were better than anything that you could have done online yourself. Like just the artwork and their handwriting is spectacular. So it was really neat to see what they could do with just the bare minimum, and they exceeded my expectations. So yeah, the technology, not having that can be a challenge, but we're doing very well without it. So
do you have enough what's the word I'm looking for, capacity for, I mean, have you had more people try and get into the program that you have quote unquote seats?
So I think there's going to be far more demand. So the question is the scheduling, the room, how we grow this over time, because there's more need there. Again, with being the first in the nation, we had to go through accreditation from the state, accreditation from the outside the Higher Learning Commission, the outside accrediting agency, and through programs both at the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. So when we got to the regional approval for the Department of Education, one of the things they said to us is, we don't even have a rubric. You're the first one to come through, so you guys fill out that application. We don't even know what to, give me 2 weeks. I don't know what quite to do with this. So until all of that got figured out, the last thing we want to do, some of these folks have been disappointed educationally, right, along the way. So you don't want to start this and then, it got a little messed up, so why don't we go back? Or, they're still waiting on approval. Or, in fact, the Higher Learning Commission approved us. And 6 weeks later, came back and said, oh, you're not approved, because now that we thought about it, there's 6 other questions we want you to answer. So here's your packet back. Now answer these. Put put it through again. So we actually, from the time these individuals were selected to the time we started offering was over a year. So that summer class, we still didn't have approval. We knew we were going to get approval, but like I said, they were just trying to figure out how to do that. So our amazing educational foundation stepped up and actually paid for that first course in that cohort so we could demonstrate to our incarcerated students how serious we were, how much we cared about their future, and let's get you started, right? And that gives us 8 weeks then for all that federal processing to catch up, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yep.
I would think, thankfully I've never been in prison, but I would think it's so boring that people would be chomping at the bit to learn or do something outside of their normal routine. At what point, do you say, hey, this is really popular, we need to maybe expand the program, maybe get more instructors?
Well, we will hire the instructors to the extent that we get the expansion. So I think they have not quite as many as we want. I think they're up to 8 or 10, right? In terms of people on a waiting list. So we will deal with that. We're also working with them. We had been approved, and this wasn't with Pell, but it was with direct funding from the Bureau of Prisons to start doing welding. And we were, again, one of the first in the nation approved. That approval came in a day and a half prior to the COVID shutdown. So now we're trying to start that program back up as well. We are also interested, once that's set up, in possibly moving into truck driving on the women's camp side. The women's camp is minimum security. The men's is a medium security. So we'd never get that release for the men, but we could get that for women. And we've actually had conversations with local employers who said that background wouldn't deter them from hiring a welder or a truck driver. And so now we're moving through the processes with making those additional programs happen.
You mentioned background, and different states have different laws about background checks and what you can ask on an application and things like that. Any concern about that here, at least in Illinois, that these people may be taking classes, getting certificates, degrees, whatever, but then when they get out, are they employable?
So that's exactly, first of all, that's why we're doing the business program, because it's a little more broadly applicable, right? So people would have options if they do run into an employer with that concern. And as we talk about those career programs, welding, truck driving, we actually survey and work with companies in the area to say, I mean, they're not guaranteeing they're going to hire this particular person, but I said, would you hire someone with this background and with this profile? Because if they're not, like I said, there's been a lot of disappointment sometimes, bad decisions on their part, but disappointments along the way. And why would you ever want to certify someone in something, and like you said, and then they can't get the job because of the background? So we've done that homework as we continue to grow that programming to make sure it truly is, right, an advantage, something that's going to move someone's life forward.
So besides business, what other kind of classes are we talking about?
So the students will have a regular English, like an English 110 class. They'll have some Excel classes as well. I mean, we have accounting. Even though most of those it's a business specialist certificate, most of them are focused on business, but they will have a few other just general education courses that, are kind of interwoven within that as well.
So for Excel then, they have computers to work on, they just don't have connectivity to the internet, is that right?
So that's what that is what FCI Pekin is working on right now, is how we're going to kind of develop that for those classes that are being offered, So I think that's kind of the goal right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you had any questions from any other prisons in the state or people who say, hey, is this working and how can we do this?
Well, I think the Department of Education is very much interested in making us a case study. Where did we have challenges setting it up? How do we go about staffing, right? And that background and that connection, how did the prison have to change what they do and get some work out the details in terms of their rules and what this would require. So we have worked out all of that, and that they hope to leverage through other communities who host federal prisons. The state prison system has always worked differently, and there has been some ongoing educational programs in that. But their goal would be to eventually establish this type of program in every federal prison. And we're just happy to say that we were the first in the nation to go there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure in the next few years you're going to see a lot of success stories. Have you personally, just in teaching a class, maybe had a moment where a student just, the light bulb went off and said, hey, I can really do this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel when I get out of here.
Yeah. Sometimes, even as an instructor, you're kind of wondering, are they retaining what you're saying, and every once in a while I'll just throw out some random questions and they are on it. They don't miss a beat. So I know that they're picking up everything that we're discussing. And it's really experiential too. A lot of them, like on the men and the women, I said, have been professionals, prior to coming. So they have a lot of, background too with, working as managers. I have a couple of the men are businessmen, entrepreneurs, and carpenters. Some of them come from the trade. So they actually do have a lot of real world experience that they can bring to those classes too. And so when we're, applying what we're learning in the classes, they absolutely are right there with the answers. So I do know that they are learning as we go.
With those people in there that already have experience, like you said, the accounting, management, carpentry, whatever, do you anticipate a time where maybe you'll have a teacher's assistant who, is in the prison, who already, maybe is in for, say, a white-collar crime, has a college degree, and wants to help other people that are in there?
Well, and several of my students, too, men and women, I have a couple women who are actually teaching and tutor the GED students that are coming in. So actually, I have one of my female students and me, actually, we share that classroom. She does a lot of stuff with the GED students that are incoming to the prison. So I have actually some educators in my class as well, just in a different capacity, but they are great. And same with the men. I have several men that are, help with the GED students and do a lot of tutoring. So yeah, they bring a lot of skill sets.
An interesting part of this program that we haven't talked about yet is there's research when the program was here 30 years ago. So the students have to meet expectations of the prison, so it's a privilege to be a part of this. And what they find is there is less disruption, right? And there's better behavior overall because everyone would like access to that. So this is what, and I can't quote those to you, but basically this is the package. This is what you need to demonstrate in order to earn this privilege. So now there's a whole group of people all looking to, to meet those requirements as we continue to grow the program. So it really just works for everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
What's your class size right now?
Right now I have 20 men and I have 13 women. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in one class? Or is it separate?
Well, the men are at the men's facility and the women are at the camp. So we are separated. The men and women are separated, but we're all together. And it also, I would feel like it's become they have kind of created their own very positive culture too. So you can see the bonds that are happening inside the classroom, and then that's, being taken a step further, and they're having that camaraderie, outside of the classroom too. So it's a great, it's just really a great incentive and a great opportunity for them to kind of all come together as well, outside of the classroom too, and create those friendships.
And Sheila, with your visit from the Department of Education recently, it sounds like they're happy with the program.
They are thrilled with the program. They are thrilled, and so we walk through. These are still the stumbling blocks, and this is what needs to you need to take a look at. We would love for the current laws to change. We'd love to let those students hit the internet while in the classroom. So if you put that on a separate server, there are ways to secure that. So only access in the classroom and then not the internet, not past that, and there are filters and a whole different story than when this program existed 30 years ago in terms of what you can do in that. But 30 years ago it was you can't have access to that. So now we are hopefully can demonstrate how that could be secured and not break their rules and still create more of a real world experience right in that classroom. So those are all steps to come, and we're excited to be part of that investigation and working out those details as those programs would then roll out nationwide.
Yeah.
When it comes to potentially changing laws, are you at a point yet where you can say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Politician, look at what we've done. Would you think about voting for a change in the law, or do you have to wait a little bit, you think, and have some more tangible results?
It's some of it will be a law has to change, and some of it will just be regulations within that system itself. So we're sort of sorting it out, what goes in each bucket. But the assistant secretary is going to write our local politicians and say, hey, these are the issues we're investigating. So we're going to keep you informed of this. Once we figure out which of these are actually law changes, we would love you to be the advocates, because this is happening in your district and you're going to be the direct benefit of these individuals having an educational credential as they exit.
Well, it's an exciting thing, and it's always exciting to be on the forefront and be the first to do something that one day may just be the norm across the country.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Dr. Sheila Quirk-Bailey and Dr. Elizabeth Godinez, thanks for coming in, and best of luck with the program.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank
we
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
All right. That is our time for right now. Thanks for joining us. Check us out at WTVP.org and on Facebook and Instagram. You Gotta See This is next.